Hello, my name is SHIN NEWMAKER, and today I want to do and okay. No. Hello, my name is SHIN NEWMAKER. I'm coming live from my very own plush and soft bed to present to you a dissection of sorts, a sort of how did I do this? What does this mean? Where does this come from? Of one of my favorite art pieces that I have ever made. Um, Maybe in my entire life, but it's it's a revisiting of what might be one of my most vulnerable, but also most spontaneous sort of works that I had ever made. This is Bomb Boy. It was a piece of writing plus drawing that I made all the way back in 2023 when I was dealing with a lot of very, a lot of, um, a lot of very harsh. I was dealing with a lot of very harsh changing emotions, and I was unable to find any form of stability in my life. I would cling on to anything that would give me the stability that I wanted. And it would end up destroying me or hurting me or doing very, it was just, it was a very violent time in my life. Um, it's, I would say that this art piece is almost as spontaneous as the feelings that it was in itself. It was It was like kind of a photograph in time, so to speak. I, but okay. But with that out of the way, I want to kind of explain where this artwork came from, s- and like try to like give my own thoughts, a reflection a year later after I basically sort of sorted everything out and I've kind of became a different person and talking about this in a way that is sort of um a way that is very a way I want to talk about this in such a way that is reflective and discuss what parts of this went into each because usually when it comes to me making art out of anger, out of sadness, out of anything else, it comes from a very spontaneous feeling. And I would say that this is probably the one time that I had a spontaneous want to create something to make a piece of art that came from my pain and agony and I want to explore kind of how it was or kind of just like explore how it came to be. So, to start it off, I'll start this off with the first image, which was this image of Bjork from Post. I saw this image because one of my mutuals got like a Sona commission draw over their first Sona doing this exact pose. And I was just instantly like enamored with it. It had a specific kind of ebb and flow that I was really wanting to harness and make something with it and try to work with and make something make something it and that's where I was inspired from this. So I started off with the first sketch, which already which it's looking at the sketch now, um, when I'm mad creating artwork sometimes, well, if I'm making artwork in a bad place, it just doesn't look good, in my honest opinion. And this sketch, in all honesty, does not look very good. But of course, if I were to probably accentuate on this, I would have probably kept I would have kept some sense of maybe something more interesting, or I wouldn't say more interesting, just like maybe kept the original idea, but at the time I was just kind of angry. So then I went with the second sketch, and this was the sketch that I came to work with. I still kept the pose, but I wanted to make it simpler for me. So you can tell that I didn't finish off this pose. I literally did like half of it. I didn't finish it. So then I started going off with the layers that came after this. I started off with this red, or like this, I don't think it's a maroon. It's just a dark, brownish red. And then I rendered Perlin noise, and then I made the Perlin noise. I changed the layer color. You can also, I think this is, in Clip Studio, you can change the layer color and make it more interesting, but I decided to, I did, it's this little box right here, you can see. If I turn it off, it kind of does the same thing, but I changed the colors to this yellow, creamish, and this white. You can also do, it is under edit, under tonal correction, you can do gradient map, which you can just use whatever colors and it will change to that color gradient. I then put on 100% overlay with this image of wires that I got off Google Images, and then I did a hard mix with more images of wires, but the way that I kind of assemble this is a little bit crucial, but also, to be quite honest, I don't know if this was like even 100% necessary, but if I were to take off this color burn with this Perlin noise, it would look just weird, discolored. And if I were to do take off the dark blue, dark red under the layer, I would get a very I would get sort of a um I would get just this really blinding color. So keeping this all together, it is important. So e- every piece of this kind of comes together, despite the fact that I feel like at a surface level, you will see that it doesn't really look it comes together despite the fact how kind of backwards maybe, or overcomplicated, or useless some of the steps in between might be. It's like Jenga, I guess. So then you got this hard light, which makes it look kind of like it's glowing, like it's the sun or a star. How I did this was actually a Clip Studio preset, which is this gradient over here. It's sunset, and then I use the circle, which allows it to be like a perfect circle and make it look like a sun or a star. Next I put on this lighter color. Oh, this is also a hard light layer and a lighter color layer. Uh, I don't know how I exactly made this lighter color layer. If I'm correct, I think I did a Perlin noise and then I used a filter and put on a either it was motion or radial blur. I think it was radial, but it was like it came in and out from the inside, if you get what I'm trying to say. So this other one, this explosion that I did, it was rendered using more of these subtool layers, which you got direct draw, speed lines, but I use the focus lines. These are specifically made for, if I remember correctly, It's used for making like manga panels or whatnot for with Clip Studio. But I used it to make this huge explosion. Um, it I don't know. Then what I did was I put on this hard mix with another gradient. It's like a gradient, but it's also, I'm pretty sure you could just probably go on Google Images and go find like images of static or whatnot. And I added a bit of grit to this drawing. It it just so it makes it look boom. So now I put on this image, this the image of the boy itself. What I would say about how this drawing came into be was the extra layers are pretty important to this. Um, I kind of I took I I copied the layers and then I put either it was a Gaussian blur or another one, but I put under the liner these blur effects to make it seem more impactful, more booming. Um, and altogether it comes together to create this. And then I put this overlay, which was another Clip Studio basic asset that I used, where it was manga gradient, and I think I reversed it so it would look like a dark circle coming in, or it would look like light, and then it would slowly turn into black darkness. Um, I then put another soft light layer of this black to make it flash more, and then I put this hard mix to give the image even more grit. As you can see all the like pixely artifacts, but you can still see all the wires. And then I put the text here and then two shadows over it because it would just it would just not pop out the same way. Um it um it uh and that's kind of just how everything came together. I used pretty much nothing but images on Google, Clip Studio, basic assets and whatnot to put together this drawing. So if you ever feel bad about using basic tools that are given to you on either like a DAW that gives you any samples or anything, using a sample pack for making music or using artwork, never feel afraid because if you know how to use them right and try to make something that you may have never seen before, which was not what I was trying to do when I created this image. I just made this image in like probably not the most healthiest um sense of the mind, but it was a very cathartic experience, I suppose I could say. Uh so uh Before I move on to talking about the actual text within this writing, I want to talk about the actual illustration. So as you can see here, uh the it's a bomb. You can see that the bomb is strapped to the neck. And to explain where that comes from, I have to go back to talking about a specific true true crime case. It is the um it is the robbery of a PNC bank in Erie, Pennsylvania by a peace of delivery man named Brian Douglas Wells. And it was an extremely complex plot. But to put it basically, it was most likely that at least I I'm kind of doing this by my notes, but so I didn't exactly look over what I remember. But basically, from what I was told, was that Brian was kind of strapped to this bomb, and he was told that he was under surveillance if he is to do anything wrong, or do anything against what is being asked, then the bomb would be detonated. But there's also the fact that he sort of didn't take the bomb seriously. Um, he he didn't t- he found later that the bomb was real. It he there was a note that was given to him on his bomb where it said act now or think later or you will die. Um it I was kind of I don't really know exactly how to describe because I don't know if this might sound tasteless or whatnot, but to put it basically, I felt a sort of similar feeling to his story in that I was also feeling like I was a victim, not exactly a victim, but like I was also a very dangerous individual that I basically had like a bomb strapped to me. Everything was going to destroy by my touch, and I didn't take this seriously until suddenly it felt like one day I realized how I had the capability to destroy anything I cared about or whatnot. And I was ready. I was, I kind of came to this feeling, this conclusion, and I thought this was what my life had suddenly become. Uh, it's a pretty sad case to try, and uh, it's a pretty sad case. I felt it was really, yeah. So now I'm going to talk about the actual text, reading it, so I can give my thoughts on it and whatnot, and tell you what some of the and tell you what the meaning of this was. So, a marvel of biological design, the first human to be born a terrorist, a weapon of mass destruction. So, if I remember correctly, what happened was, well, this specific line was inspired by a specific artist who did artworks of um one of my favorite one of my favorite kind of artworks, which is how they kind of take specific um they took a character that did not have as much expansion in the actual story. So they made do with what they had and they created a new, like, I wouldn't say they made like a new, they kind of took what could be implied or what they personally felt in this character and invoked it into artwork. And uh, I'm being kind of vague because a friend of mine is uh is playing the game in question. I will say this. Please, 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 uh heed the spoiler warnings on the blog in question. It is Death by Glitter. Um their work the work is made by Jade. They're probably one of my greatest artistic inspirations. And I was extremely moved by one of the lines in one of them, which was I born a weapon of mass destruction? And I really felt that during this time as sort of feeling like a dangerous individual who was going to destroy everything and anything that I loved and I touched. The next line was the cherubim watched over its conception. The angels followed the manual written by God. They sung gunpowder into its scalp and sodium chloride pumped through its veins. Uh, One of the things that I remember very vividly about writing this was how I very specifically tried not to use the same word twice. I remember when I was writing this, I didn't even write this in a notebook. I was just writing it as I went, and I was just going at it. So I I already said cherubim. I think it was like the angels watched over his conception, and I said the angels twice. So I made it different because this is a writing that kind of stands on its own, and if it stands on its own, it has to be like it has it to make it stand on its own. You have to whip out new things, whip new punches, whatnot. And that's what I was doing with this. Of course, the cherubim watched over its conception. Cherubim in Abrahamic religions are probably um, one of the highest angels in biblical theology, and they are built to. They are. Uh, they're kind of. Um, they're very. They're very. They have a lot of agency and power, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, basically. Uh, but to go over this, so this line specifically is actually a rebuilding, retelling, uh, like a new way, sort of, um, it was a song that I was used to hearing, which was "They Long to Be Close to You" by the Carpenters. And it's the bridge that says, "On the day that you were born, the angels got together and decided to create a dream come true. So they sprinkled moon dust in your hair of gold and starlight in your eyes of blue." And I made this as sort of like that when I was being made in heaven. It's kind of just like it's like a subversion, I guess, so to speak. Because one of the other things that I read about at the time was kind of, I think it was like at the time I was really into sort of, or I heard one of the theories about how Judas Iscariot of biblical fame was, there's like a theory in biblical circles that Judas was actually doing the greatest, did the greatest, one of the greatest betrayals to fulfill the greatest prophecy. So it was kind of like reverse psychology. And I was kind of thinking, man, I'm kind of like that, you know? Like, what if I was born to give these people their trials, and then they overcome these trials, then they forget about me, and then they forget about me, or I destroy myself and try to and eliminate myself from the picture, if you get what I'm trying to say. This is gonna what's no. It was a very yeah, it was a very it's a very dark time, everybody. I've already said this like 50 trillion times. So the other thing, which was that the manual written by God is, and the gunpowder and the sodium chloride. So the gunpowder is obvious. Gunpowder makes guns. Guns go boom. I think at the time, but I was also kind of like, I think the of course nobody knows. Nobody exactly knows how bombs are made. I don't know how bombs are made. Of course, but when I was writing this, the only way that I knew how to craft bombs was probably by Minecraft and TNT. But so then, okay. So to go over the actual secret lore, I guess you could say, which was the manual written by God. So, of course, the manual refers to the fact that it's the directions in which a person is being made. I felt as though that I was like doomed to be created, blah 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 blah. I've already said this before, but I I was specifically inspired by a line or a scene from Of All the Places, Polai Magi Madoka Magica. And there was a scene where one character is crafting bombs and they're reading from a manual or um they're reading from a website on the dark web, but it's named Hara Hara Toke. It was a far left extremist organization that created manuals for with bombs, and it had like a sort of catch line that was anyone with a middle school level knowledge of chemistry can do it. It was basically one of the things was that the instructions made it so that during the summer uh you can get like sodium chloride and make explosives from it without being seen as suspicious, because sodium chloride helped with herbicides and rural communities to create for farming, if I remember correctly. uh so what can we understand from this? I was basically saying I'm ontologically doomed. Well, no, not ontologically. I don't even know what that word means. Um, okay. The dove wrapped it in wires. Tying the bow sealed his fate. His heartbeat faded to march to the final second, set in stone, minus 56 8 E plus 8. So, the line, the doves wrapped it in wires, tying the bow sealed his fate. This is a reference to one of my um, favorite, uh, writers out there, Porpentine Charity Heartscape, and it was specifically their character. It was specifically in referral to the character Rubicon, and from their story Contour's Enemy, and the story, and it's a bit of a it's kind of weird to try and explain what Rubicon or like what Contour's Enemy is. It's very uh it's about twink terrorist, and uh like it's kind of like yaoi. It's yaoi, but it's like you got um it's like light and L Death Note yaoi, but like crazier, high stakes explosions everywhere. um but to put it simply, uh the way Rubicon was written in this story was one that personally affected me. It was a to read off what Porpentine said in referral to writing Rubicon. Immense suffering, but kind of tap dancing around the pain, latching onto obsessions, jokes, skittering between modalities. I find it relatable because a lot of my personality was forged against a backdrop of constant physical pain. With pain, it's hard to be consistent. I think of people who are seen as acting out, the type of kid I was seen as. They don't think about the reasons for it, but pain sharpens time, can make one impatient, hungry, because each second has a cost attached to it. I always wanted to be doing something that was worth the pain of living. I really like the way, like, it, like, the way, the, the just kind of feeling felt in that kind of way. Like, feeling like I remember how I was always told I was a kid who was acting out. There was a lot. It's a lot. But let's go back to discussing what I was trying to say here. The doves wrapped it in wires, tying the bow sealed his fate. Of course, this is saying wires, bombs. Tying the bow is putting it together. Bomb, blah blah blah. And it was a reference to the one of the lines that came in from Contorn's Enemy, which referred to Rubicon, and it was Rubicon can make a very mean, very reasonable bomb from household parts by age 10. They flock to his fingers like doves. Um, it was a it, it it's kind of like my personal way of reading into this is that they flock to his fingers like doves is referring to how um they flock to his fingers like doves is referring to how it just kind of comes naturally like second nature, and that's what how I felt, that like destruction and hurt um just comes to me, and it was, very natural, or just like second nature. Ticking past that minute, on the dime, the bomb was overclocked and he lived on borrowed time. Oh wait, before I go back, before I talk about that line. Okay. So set in stone 56 5 ne, 5 set in stone 5.68 E plus 8. So this is I think, if I remember correctly, sealed his fate 5.6 E plus 8. Uh, mm, 5.68 E plus 8. I don't know. I think I was doing a rhyming scheme. Um, and what I was trying to do was that's those those seconds. Uh, I think I rounded it up because I looked it up. The number here is supposed to represent feeling, um, because I'll say it like this, a lot of the really awful and evil shit in my life started happening at the age of 18. And I see people around me who are like, I want to be 18. And I'm like, no, you don't not want to be 18. Because I feel like, because personally being 18 has been like a very, very hard year for me to get used to a lot of, or come to terms with a lot of things in my life. And I I found that being 18 was kind of like a cursed year for me, because I thought when I turned 18 that this was going to be my age. I was going to be like I was going to do everything I ever wanted when I was 18, and then things really went south and it was not fun. But anyway, so at first I was like wondering what the fuck were the seconds here again? I totally forgotten. And then I looked it up and I was like, oh yeah, it was 18 years to seconds is 5.67 E 8676 E plus 8, which is I honestly don't know why I shortened it down. I think I was doing a rhyming scheme, but I don't sealed his fate. Sealed his fate. 5.6 E plus 8. It doesn't even work. I don't know. But either way. So, ticking past that minute, on the dime, the bomb was overclocked and he lived on borrowed time. So, overclocked, I actually had to Google that word. And apparently overclocking is the practice of increasing the clock rate of a computer to exceed that certified by the manufacturer. And of course, this is supposed to represent that, because at the time I thought being 18 was going to be my year, but it turned out that a lot of really bad shit was happening when I turned 18, so I just thought, man, I shouldn't have even been alive for being 18. It's dark to talk about, but of course, I'm speaking to this as being 20. I am experiencing my life, and I'm probably a lot more calm and in stasis. I'm on medication now, which tells a lot. Um, but I came to, I've come to understand now. Well, actually, let me leave that for later. So, taking past that minute on the dime, the bomb was overclocked and he lived on borrowed time. So overclocked was a term that I had to Google. Um because the game never told me what the fuck it was supposed to be about. And overclocking is basically just it's a computing term where the practice of increasing the clock rate of a computer to exceed that certified by the manufacturer. And of course, this is it's uh of I didn't know what the word meant, but I do know that I got it from the game Shin Megami Tensei Devil Survivor, and overclocking is like the main plot point of the game. The characters have to keep going despite the fact that there's time clocks over their head, and if they and they're fated to die otherwise, and it would be a very it is a very violent and evil death in a very dog eat dog world, and I kind of felt that, but I think I was just looking for the term overclocked. But going back, taking past that minute on the dime, the bomb was overclocked, which is like, you know. But the one thing here that I want to note is that on the dime, if I remember correctly, I don't know, but I also have never met anybody else who have used the term on the dime except for maybe my brother. Either that or I think I made it up. I, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but on the dime basically just means like, you know, going past a specific time and dime 10 seconds. I'm used to hearing people say like, "Oh, it's a quarter." Like it's a quarter till noon. But I've never hear people say like it's a nickel till noon or it's a penny, you know? But I use dime. Um I probably could have used quarter, but to be honest, what rhymes with quarter that I could what rhymes with quarter that I could probably use in this? He was left to burn. His touch, men's souls would combust, and nobody left to turn his thoughts, his loved ones, down to dust. I think I reread this and I realized that I think maybe the way that I wrote this specific line just was uh it was just very um it was very I think there was just something in the way that I wrote this that, if I remember correctly, I wasn't 100% sure if I liked, but it's nothing I can't change now. And I'm not going to change it. But either way, so he was left to burn, his touch, men's souls would combust. This is a reference to, um, actually a song lyric from one of Debbie McCallion's old projects, Eat Babies, and it was the song the, the incredible rumbly grumbly of my insecurity. And it's a song that I'm not 100% sure if it's about, but it also just seems very much to be about having an eating disorder. And there's a line that says, um, if they come looking for hellfire, I've got it. Up on my red rotten mountain of rust. Always gotta keep my hands in my pockets because I got a touch that makes men's souls erupt. And it's once again, it goes back to the feeling of like having everything I touch be cursed, be evil, be fated for destruction. Um, and it was just, you know, not good thoughts. Uh, his thoughts, his loved ones down dust, you know, Midas touch. But instead of having things turn to gold, everything turns to ash and destruction. And finally, the gorilla wished to apologize for his acts alone, to return to nothing, be his own killer, and take with him all he owned. During this time, I was having a lot of thoughts over what was the point of me being born in the first place. I remember very vividly there was a lot of points where I was wondering, just for what reason do I have for life if this is the pain that I'm going to have to bear with it. I thought I was used to the kind of pain that would come with it, but the pain that I was experiencing at the time was very unique. And to um with what I was trying to say with gorilla is kind of very unethical, very messy. There is also the fact that sometimes guerrilla warfare can involve children, which was kind of how I felt um and as not as a child, but sort of as like maybe kind of like growing up in the kind of household where where kind of being seen as a child was not really too much, or having my like options uh and myself being evaluated in ways that were very adult and out of my control and just very unfortunate and not good. uh yeah. So class, what can we learn from this piece of artwork? Well, for one thing I learned is that it's nearly almost, I made this in 2023. It's nearly 2025. I would say that all of what I experienced in this writing was extremely vulnerable, but also very cathartic. And the what person I've kind of become now has definitely grown and turned into a better person from the time that I was writing this and the perspective that I was writing this from. Never ever feel like you are the one thing that I have learned in the past year that I have been alive, and also being 20 years old. When I, because like when I turned 20, I thought, like, man, I actually made it this far. I turned 20, which was crazy because like I could never visualize what my life would be like when I turned 20 and being an adult. And while I do think that there's a lot of unique experiences, there's a lot of unique pains, you also need to understand that it is important to understand that the greatest gift you could ever have is your life, is being alive, is experiencing the joys of life and just living despite the fact that you experience a lot of pain and learning from it and just understanding other people and becoming a human, sort of, is what I came to learn from creating, from the time that I spent with making this artwork. It's very far back in my past. I would say it's almost like very far back in my past, but sometimes I think about this piece of artwork and I remember how far I've come from just maybe even a year that came from this piece and where I am now. And I'm very grateful to be surrounded by people who are very evidently very loving and very caring and will give everything they can for me. And I'm very grateful that um, I'm very grateful that I've made it this far. Uh, so thank you for listening to me talk about my artwork for an absorbently amount of long time. Uh, 46 minutes, which is a little better in comparison to the fact that I got through not even half of this without a script in one of my first tries while I was whispering in the back of my bed um, last night, and I wanted to, and I kind of got through it in like a way shorter amount of time. There might be some stuff that I will cut out anyway, and I don't know. Thank you for listening to me talk for an exorbitant amount of time about one piece of artwork that I made a long time ago, and what it means to me, and where I came from, and where I wanted to, what maybe you could learn from my artistic, uh, talent and whatnot. Maybe not talent, my artistic, uh, my workflow, and you could learn one or two things from it. Thank you, and I hope you all take care of yourself and have a wonderful day. Thank you.